Marina's part of our current show, All in the Golden Afternoon, featuring work by four artists, all with great connections to Georgia. Marina's connection is through her roots here in Columbus, Georgia. And the show will be up for 2 more weeks, so please stop by to see these pieces in person if you can. If not, check them out on our website. You can always see what Marina's up to on her Instagram. But Marina, it's so good to see you. I feel like it's been a while since we've had a chance to rendezvous. So, how is everything?
Everything is good. I think this is maybe the first works that I sent to you that I made in my new studio. I think prior to this, so I'm actually outside of Charleston now. I was in Charleston till about like a year and a half, 2 years ago. And so now we are in Hollywood, South Carolina, which is it's a lot of farmland, a lot of marshland, lots of just open land. It's not really anything like Charleston. It's very rural, and we have a lot of space here. It's very quiet. So I'm actually like 30 minutes outside of the downtown of Charleston.
Well, that's great. It's still, when you need it,
Yeah.
Charleston's right around the corner, but it's a very wonderful place to create art, Hollywood, South
Yeah.
Carolina. Well, for those of you who may not know Marina and her work, Marina, tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I am primarily a painter, and I make abstract paintings. They are somewhat loosely inspired by nature in kind of ways that are visual, but also really obvious in a tactile way. Like I love to use sand and natural materials in my art. And it's a very intuitive form of painting. But I also love to incorporate some kind of planning into it, and I've been doing that a lot more in my paintings. Um, and I am originally from Minsk, Belarus. I moved to the States when I was 9 years old. And when I moved straight to Columbus, Georgia, and lived there for about 17 years, and then moved to Charleston, and then to Hollywood, South Carolina, where I am now.
Well, it's been fascinating to watch the arc of your career. We've now been working together for almost 10 years, I think. So it's been wild to see the beginnings of this adventure you've been on with your subject matter and materials and where it's brought you here today. And I'm excited to turn the camera around so everybody can see how much these paintings have changed even since the last show. But let's talk a little bit about this lyrical abstract painting that you do. And, you know, it's so fascinating to me watching artists sort of find something that they're really excited about and then, you know, making it the focus of their artistic journey. When did you sort of realize that this language was something that you really wanted to focus on and develop? When I first met you, you were doing these abstract paintings on paper. They've now become these really bold, really layered paintings on canvas. Just take everybody through. I think most people who aren't artists, you know, they think you're sort of born with this talent. You're born with this idea, the subject matter, and you just sort of pursue it. But it has to be something that you sort of hunt for, and then you have to, you know, sort of follow the muse. But also, it's a lot of hard work when it comes to developing a style like this. So just bring us back to that moment where you said, did you have an aha, like this is something that really speaks to me, this is a language that I love?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started making art kind of on a serious level in high school, and when I say serious, I mean I just was giving it a good amount of focus. And in high school, that was very experimental. I tried sort of, the still life drawing, and that I I had kind of I had some success in that, so that led me to understand that I'm pretty good at drawing and interpreting the world visually, but I never really liked drawing. And I never liked really representing things in a true way. But I did have some ability, not that I was like very good or anything, but I did have like an understanding for that process. But I just really didn't like doing it myself, although I have a really, really strong appreciation for representational art. Myself, it wasn't something that I really was super captivated by. And that's kind of the funny thing about people when they start to dabble in art. I think a lot of people assume, I can't draw that very well. I'm not, I can't draw this apple in front of me, so maybe I'm just not very good. And that couldn't be further from the truth, because if you're not very good at drawing that thing in front of you, maybe you're just like not interested enough to learn how to do it, and that tells you that maybe that specific way of creating work is just not something that resonates with you, but it has nothing to do with someone's ability to be an artist. So once I realized I have some understanding of art and drawing, and I love the process, but I'm not like super interested in creating things in a representational manner, that's when I decided to try abstraction. And actually, it was just a really simple exercise in high school where our teacher gave us an assignment to just like copy another artist, just copy their style. And I picked Picasso because that was like the artist that I knew at that time, and I just copied that Cubism style, and it turned out really well. I mean, for a high school student and for how much fun I had with it, it turned out really well. And that's when I realized that I actually like abstraction. I'm really interested in that, and so that led me towards different types of abstraction. And then when I got to college, I basically experimented with everything. I studied art, and I think that having that time of experimenting was really important, because I tried different media. I tried painting, I tried sculpture, I tried resin, I tried watercolor. So basically trying everything under the sun is really helpful to figure out what draws your interest. And the process of working with media that is kind of hard to control was really interesting to me in all types of material. I liked things that you can't have an absolute sort of perfect what you envisioned as the final result, and you have to kind of exhibit some intuition and some control, but you also have to embrace that this material kind of has a mind of its own. Those things were really interesting to me in both 2D and 3D media. And so then when I graduated college, I was working in this kind of fluid media material, that the realm of fluid acrylic. And those were the paintings, I think, that I showed in your gallery for the first time that I showed there. There were works on paper, and they're made in this very kind of fluid process where you let paint kind of flow, and you have sort of minimal control, but it requires a bit of intuition, a bit of control. And those works on paper were kind of where I was focused for a while. Eventually, the reason the paper that I worked on was so beneficial to the process is that it was a non-absorbent paper, and it lets the pigment stay on top, and it had this very unique way of drying. But working on paper is very limiting. You just can't go very large, and it also just has this fragile quality where you just can't over process it. It can only take, at least in my way of working, it can only take so much. So that led me to sort of developing a surface on my canvases that kind of mimic that paper, essentially having that non-absorbent quality. And for me, and in my way of painting and in my process, that kind of process oriented approach really complements also kind of my curiosities and and kind of really leads to the development of the very specific visual style I have. It's very much led by just an interest in materials and an interest in process. um, so once I figured out a way to kind of have that exact surface for my canvases that I wanted, I was really able to discover like a visual language that felt like I couldn't in kind of like the ready materials that you can get in the store, like paper and canvas. Um, so that that's what kind of led to the development of these works that are on canvas, and I feel like that that's kind of where I'm at today. If so, that's a short sort of summary.
Well, it's interesting to see because a lot of those works that were on paper, it was all about these beautiful translucent layers that you were building up that were very expressive. Um, and then now you have this new surface that incorporates those translucent layers, but I love that you've now added these new layers of opaque materials like sand that have become a part of your language. Um, it's always interesting to hear sort of, I guess the passion side of an artist. And for you, the passion, has been your, exploring these materials. You talk a lot about the intuitive side of your work because you have control, but you also have to let the materials be the materials. And I think everybody,
Mm-hmm.
please take time to look at Marina and her Instagram because you do such a good job showing people a little bit behind the curtain about what it means to sort of let these materials, you know, do what they want to do while at the same time you're the boss and you're in control, and how much you love what you're doing with these materials. In the end, with the finished product that we're going to look at shortly, what is it that you, with each body of work, what what do you want these pieces to say to a viewer when they walk in the gallery and see them? Do you want them to fall in love in the same way that you have with these materials and the process? Do you want people to feel the connections that these pieces have to nature? Do you want sort of all of these things? What is, as a goal, what is it for you that you're after when you create these pieces?
I think the ultimate goal when I think when any artist makes artwork is for the viewer to sort of um, be grabbed enough by the work to start asking questions. For me, when I see artwork in person, uh, what I would judge as a successful artwork is one that stopped me and got me to ask some sort of question, whether it is, you know, an open ended question or a very short question. I think be in conversation with the artwork is kind of the ultimate goal. And I think to some extent that means making work that is not instantly obvious. There should be a level of mystery and curiosity. Of course, what someone brings, the questions that someone brings to any artwork, it's kind of a mirror. It's a reflection of yourself, the questions you ask, because it lies within your interests. So really the specific thing that I would want from a person, it would be impossible for me to say, but just to start that process of approaching the work and being curious enough about it to ask yourself questions, and then that leads you to maybe look into the depth of the artist, the depth of the work. That for me is the goal. And I think when I see artwork out in the world, I mean, the pieces that do that, there's not necessarily any common thread that I could put my finger on. They're not always beautiful. They're not always complex. They're not always minimal. There is just something kind of under the surface of the work that, you know, stops you and gets you to ask a question and engage with it. So for me, artwork that's immediately obvious is less interesting. If I feel like I sort of figured it out as soon as I approached it, which is not really the case a lot, but if that does happen, then I just don't have further interest. So I think it needs to be something that the viewer relates to and understands, and there's some commonality that the viewer connects with. There's some familiarity in the work that the viewer can connect with. But then there is a level of mystery that gets them to further think about the work. So my hope is that my work does that for people, because that starts the conversation.
I love that. It's almost a two-step process. It's there. There needs to be a truthful connection in order to start that conversation. And I think that your work certainly does that. I think all the artists in this show, it's so fascinating to see how they build these connections so that these conversations can happen. And I think it's just a wonderful way to look at art and think. It's interesting. We talk about success in work, and I think that's something to really think about. How successful was that connection that the artist initially, hopefully, tried to make, and then how was the conversation simply, "Hey, look, I matched the couch," or did it actually have something more to say? And those great paintings are the ones that keep you up at 3 a.m. With ended conversations. Well, Marina, why don't we turn the camera around so everybody can see how beautiful this body of work is, and we can talk a little bit more about what inspires you. Marina, you haven't seen the installation yet, but it's a lot of fun because from back here you get to your work and Susan's work, and even when we're over here, you can see your work and Shelby's work and Susan's work all together. But this is one of the pieces that sort of starts that conversation. And I love, again, how it communicates with all the other pieces in the gallery. But for those of you who are watching, I hope that you can see it has so many of those beautiful translucent layers that we were talking about, but also those wonderful opaque layers that have become some new vocabulary for you, especially incorporating sand. And then I just love what's happening here with these new lines that you're creating with these thick layers here of sand. This literally is a millimeter or two off of the canvas. So when we look at this piece, I feel so many different things. I feel the energy. I feel like when you're looking at your work these days, I feel the wind of being in these beautiful outdoor spaces. I feel the water. I feel all the elements. So I feel like you've done such a wonderful job taking all of the things that make being outside, being in nature, and brought them to your work. Is that part of what you're trying to do with these new materials?
There is the sense of movement, of organic movement, that just happens naturally when I kind of give some leeway to the material as I'm working with it. So that sense of wind or water or movement, that just comes from kind of allowing gravity to move the pigment in a way. So I think it's just a very natural, organic outcome of the process. And then I am starting to incorporate just a level of very specific, very technical placement of shapes. And I have been doing that by by dividing the canvas basically in several sections and then joining it together. And so the areas where the paint is in these thick lines, those are areas where I'm joining parts of the painting together. And so in this particular case, I divided the composition in 3 or 4 shapes, and I like for each shape to kind of feel like its own atmosphere and almost have that feeling of connected but divided moments happening in one canvas. But this technique of creating these sculptural lines on top of the canvas, that came to me through a process that I've been experimenting with where I cut the canvas and then I arrange it back together. And in order to arrange the canvas back together, I have to sort of fill that seam in between the two canvases. And I've been doing that by creating this line. It's almost like in a mosaic, you have the grout that's in between tiles. And this is kind of a similar idea where this is it's a mechanism to join canvases back together. And this process for me it's been really an interesting process where I feel like the material actually teaches me about the painting, because when you cut a canvas, it's like it's a composition you've created, but once you cut it and disjoin it, it's almost like it's not a composition that you created anymore. It takes that premeditative aspect out of painting and I think that's a really interesting way to create a painting, just to cut out moments of different works and then join those moments together. And then in a way that they are harmonious, but they are sort of a little bit alien to each other, if that makes sense. I think that kind of tension creates a very unique composition.
Well, it's so fascinating that they almost become these wonderful, like you said, different chapters within the painting, and they act as these barriers between textures and colors. It's wild to see the texture within this shape sort of build as it gets closer to this dividing line, and then it spills over into a whole nother, like you said, atmosphere. This painting to me is so fun to look at because the building blocks are there. It's primary colors that are mixing together and forming the entire rainbow. There's really nice lights and darks that are happening, which give the painting lots of depth. I love the movement of the lines that you've chosen, especially those that sort of go off the canvas and then come back up. There's just so much to look at, and those wonderful surprises, they just keep popping up the more you spend time with this painting.
Thank you.
This one's called Overland. I always encourage all of our artists to spend thoughtful time thinking about their titles. Tell us a little bit about your titling your work. Is this something that happens before? Do you have a notebook filled with titles and ideas? Is it something that happens after the painting has been completed?
Yeah. Yeah, titling, I agree, is really important for the work. I keep a notes app with potential titles, and those are just typically words or phrases that I collect over time, that I come up sort of to a word or a phrase that to me just has dual or multiple interesting components. Like it may be something that has a surface level meaning, but then also suggests kind of more or deeper ideas. So then I don't think about, this painting will be titled this. I actually make the painting without any idea of what exactly I'm going to title it until the end. And then I reference this document that I have, and then I just kind of find it fitting. If I see just a specific title that I think, oh, that really fits with kind of the atmosphere of this piece, um, and then I just connect the two.
I love that. It's like it's starting the conversation and telling you what its name should be.
Yeah.
I love this crashing wave that you've created through here. There's a few moments like that where we have these waves that are breaking on the surface of the canvas.
Yeah, thank you.
So, one thing I think is a fun constant through all the work in this show is, you know, I don't think that I remember seeing a body of work from you thus far where almost all the primary colors are tackled in each picture, and in a very subtle way, because I think if you said to someone, what color is this painting, they would say, oh, it's these cool, beautiful shades of, blues. Well, that's true. The majority is a lot of beautiful shades of blues, from very dark to very light, but also you've got these wonderful reds and yellows that are playing their part in these pictures. Again, just expanding that vocabulary, and especially when you look at a picture like this, which is so fun. I hope everyone can see how texture has become such a part of this body of work, from the individual grains of sand that you can see to the building up of these beautiful lines. I love where you get this optical mixing that's happening between uh, the light blues and yellows that are not mixing on the palette or as paint, but really mixing as these layers are built up.
Mm-hmm.
Again, these lights and darks coming together.
Yeah, I really actually it's great that you notice about the primary colors, because I love when I can sort of make them work in unison but without being very obvious about just using the primary colors. And I love to get it's very interesting for me to get kind of the initial colors and then incorporate sort of this gradient rainbow within the painting as much as possible. So it's kind of like there are these little bits of primary colors that live right on the surface in sort of condensed areas, especially like the line work, and then what's below it kind of diffuses into a range of gradients, and that for me is a way to build depth into the painting. But those pieces, for example, those couple, the two that are blue and red, and they are the same colors as Overland, which is the larger painting we were just talking about. And actually, the when I was working on that painting, I was working on a couple of other paintings at the same time that were to be of the same series. And I love to work on paintings. I love to do multiple paintings at one time. I don't like to work on one painting at a time, because I think that creates an overthinking and an overworking problem for me. And a lot of my paintings, they need just sort of time to breathe before I do the next step, because I have a tendency of, I think, losing a painting. It's happened to me a lot before. So what I do is I work on 3 to 4 to 5 at a time. And so when I was working on the companion pieces that go with that larger painting, I basically felt like I overworked them and I lost that quality where things feel kind of organic and effortless, but with a sense of intention. I felt like I lost that quality. So those other paintings are became what are the small paintings but cut up. And so all of these small paintings were larger. They were like about the same size as Overland. And I decided to just cut out the moments that I like and cut out the moments, and they were just like very irregular shapes, but just cut out what I like that happened in that painting. And I think that's really freeing to do as an artist who works on canvas, because it always feels when you're working just like on a square rectangular canvas that you're bound by the confines of that canvas or that panel. And for me, it's very freeing to just be able to say, like, I'm just going to cut out this moment because I like what happened just right here, and I'm going to connect that with something else. So those small paintings, a lot of them happened as that process of just isolating shapes or colors that I like and then joining them together in a smaller painting. And that's why some of those are studies, because if a painting is sort of made in that way where I'm experimenting, I call it a study of the larger piece.
I love that. I love the idea that, you know, the rules of the square canvas uh, can be broken. I hope that's liberating for any artists that are watching this, because nothing is more intimidating than staring at a blank white canvas. So to know that you can take those moments that you are most happy with and focus on those and, you know, represent them in a way, I think is really exciting and liberating.
Yeah, and I think that process can also lead to further works that maybe, I mean, at least for me, that I didn't think of. Like if I cut a canvas or I have a loose canvas, I also start to think of it in this kind of sculptural way. And how could a canvas, not necessarily be on the wall, but how could it be on the floor? How could it be maybe not a square shape at all? Those are ideas that haven't materialized into a final artwork for me, but they kind of get the process going. I no longer, since I've started this process of cutting up canvases and putting them back together, I no longer think of I no longer think of anything as defined as a rectangular or square shape, because I think it could be, I could have a painting that's just an irregular oval, and that would be interesting, kind of just manipulating space in that way. So I think just that process of constantly experimenting for me really builds on how works can progress and evolve.
Well, I love how much these small works have to say, but I also love it. I love seeing you work large. Your last show with us, unfortunately, happened right at the beginning of the pandemic, and but you
Yeah.
had some magnificent, really majestic, big, beautiful paintings. I know you've got a show that's going to be opening in London soon. That's going to have some big, large scale paintings in that show. Tell us a little bit about what all the Londoners can expect from your upcoming show.
Those, I have a couple of larger paintings in that. It's a group show that'll open mid-July. And those are all large scale works, so they definitely have a different atmosphere. In them, I feel like um, the a large scale really allows you to capture sort of an atmospheric quality rather than that tangible kind of small object quality that I think is present in small works. So that I think that really highlights the material and the texture in a different way. But I do think small paintings on an intimate scale have something really powerful. Like, I absolutely love working small. They just have this precious, intimate quality that is totally different from large scale work. So I think combining the two as much as possible for me is very interesting.
Will you be heading across the pond for the opening in July?
No, I'm not, because I'm going just 1 month later. I'm going to Italy, so it would be too much traveling in a very short time. So I am not.
Are you going to Italy for pleasure?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Marina, we haven't talked too much about these the other group of paintings, which I feel like they are very different from the studies that went along with Overland. Uh, and I just thought I could touch upon them before we close. I feel like there's a different energy with these pictures. I love this wildflower painting. Again, if you ask someone, oh, well, tell me, describe this painting, they might talk about beautiful blues where the ocean meets the sky. But I think when you get close and start looking at, oh, there's some amazing color mixing happening here. And again, some of it optical, some of it um, you're doing when the paint's still wet, but you've got the entire range of the color spectrum happening here. I especially love what you did with this translucent layer of this red on top of all the colors that are happening and textures underneath. Just look at how much energy there is between these cool layers and this warm layer. It's really magical. I could spend all day looking at this painting.
Thank you. Those those paintings are really kind of exploring symmetry and kind of that central balance. So they are very they're more structured in nature. I feel like, especially wildflower, that's kind of it sort of is very symmetrical and a bit more. There's a bit more structure and planning involved in a piece like that, and I think as far as the colors, I like to combine colors that are sort of difficult to get to work together normally, in the sense of layering them. So layering, yellow over blue, it can muddy the composition, but I'm really interested in ways that they can really pulsate, and that color can sort of the visual weight created with that color can balance the painting, as well as having the composition that is also visually balanced, but how those elements can work together. Those are the things I'm exploring with those paintings.
Well, again, and I've said this for years, you make it look so graceful and effortless when you post on your Instagram your behind the scenes shots. If you gave these materials to most people and said, have at it, it would become such a mess so fast. I hope everyone hates the hard work, the time that you've put into you know, masterfully, you know, taking on the challenge of these materials and how you use them. Um, you talk a lot about the intuitive side of art making, and that intuition comes from all of the hard work that you've put into understanding these materials. And it just fascinates me how you can get these graceful curves, these beautiful lines, these wonderful gradations out of a material as um, as complex as sand. So
Yeah, it
so
takes
fun.
it's funny because it does take a lot of effort in order to produce something that actually appears effortless, because that effortless quality, it goes in tandem with this feeling of just an organic shape or presence of these organic forms that kind of take you into that realm of nature inspired abstraction. I want it to look effortless. The problem, that one of the biggest challenges for me is a painting that is overworked, because I think then there's a certain amount of magic that is lost. So preserving that kind of effortless or happenstance quality is really important. And I feel like that balance between that, but a careful sort of mastering of the material, balancing those two aspects is what finally creates a successful painting for me. And it definitely can be lost very easily.
Well, all of the paintings in this show are magnificent, masterful works of art, very successful in terms of the connections that they bring, the conversations that they start. So, thank you so much, Marina, for discussing these works with us today. I feel like I've lived with them for the last over a month now, and I'm already seeing new mysteries and surprises since we've started our conversation. So,
Thank you.
thank you for all you do. And I hope you have a very exciting and successful, lots of red dots in London.
Thank you.
And, uh, and I hope you have an adventuresome trip to Italy. Tell everybody where you're headed in Italy for this trip.
We're going to Milan and Venice and Florence.
Will you have your sketchbook in your lap while you're traveling? Is that something you like to do?
No, I don't. I don't like to sketch. I really don't. I really don't like like pen, paper, that process. I don't actually don't like it at all. So I will not. I will take reference photos just of things that sort of pique my interest. But um, yeah, I don't like to sketch. I need the environment when I'm making artwork. I need a controlled environment, and I need everything that I need to be kind of within reach. So when I'm left, with just a pencil or something and a notebook, that's not enough for me. And I also need that sort of perfect space to make the work. So can't do that.
I had another artist friend recently said, "I'm on vacation. Why in the world would I be creating art?"
Yeah, I mean, I understand that train of thought too.
Well, again, thank you for this beautiful body of work. We're so grateful to have it here in the gallery. And everybody, spend some time with these pieces online if you can't make it into the gallery soon. But if you can, I can't encourage you enough to come and see what these paintings have to offer in person. The subtle variations between colors as they move through these paintings, the textures as they change through these paintings really needs to be experienced in person. So, again, thank you, Marina. And
Thank
we
you.
look forward to seeing all of you art lovers in the gallery soon.
Thank you.